It was supposed to be just another college basketball game. March 31, 2013, Louisville versus Duke, Elite 8 of the NCAA Tournament. CBS broadcasting live to millions of households across the United States. Two programs with championship pedigrees, two rosters full of future NBA players, a game tight enough to keep everyone on the edge of their seat. Nobody was watching Kevin Ware specifically. He was not the star. He was not the reason anyone tuned in. He was a sophomore guard doing his job, defending, running the floor, playing within the system. Solid, reliable, invisible in the best way a role player can be invisible. Then, 63 seconds into the second half, Kevin Ware jumped to contest a three-point shot. He landed wrong. What happened next would be replayed on every sports network for the next 72 hours. It would be described by players, coaches, and broadcasters as the worst thing they had ever witnessed on a basketball court. It would make grown men collapse. It would make professional athletes, men trained their entire lives to perform under pressure, turn away and weep openly on national television. Kevin Ware's right leg snapped. Not twisted, not sprained. Snapped. The bone broke through the skin in a compound fracture so severe that the broadcast cut away immediately. The bone protruded 6 inches outside his leg. He was 19 years old. To understand what made that moment so uniquely devastating, you have to understand what a compound fracture does to a room. Pain is usually private. You see someone hurt, you feel sympathy, you move on. But a compound fracture visible to the naked eye bypasses sympathy entirely. It triggers something older, something biological. The human brain is hardwired to recoil from structural damage to the body, not because of empathy alone, but because of pure survival instinct. When you see bone outside skin, your nervous system registers it as a threat, not just to the person in front of you, but to you personally. Every player on that court experienced that response simultaneously. Duke's players, the opposing team, men competing for their own championship hopes stopped. Several covered their mouths. At least 2 turned completely away from the scene. 1 sat down on the court and could not immediately get up. These were elite athletes. Men who had absorbed physical punishment their entire lives. Men who had been coached to maintain composure in every circumstance. They had no composure. Nobody did. Louisville's players were worse. These were Kevin Ware's teammates. The men who had practiced with him, eaten with him, shared a locker room with him every day for months. Russ Smith fell to his knees immediately. Shane Behanan buried his face in his jersey. Head coach Rick Pitino, a Hall of Fame coach who had been in basketball for 4 decades, turned away and could not look. The broadcast team on CBS went silent for several seconds, something that almost never happens in live sports coverage. When they spoke again, their voices had changed. Here's the detail that nobody talks about enough. While his teammates collapsed around him, while coaches turned away, while trained medical professionals rushed onto the court, Kevin Ware was calm, not the numbness that sometimes follows severe trauma before the pain arrives. Not shock in the clinical sense, calm, aware, present. The first thing Kevin Ware said when he hit the floor with his bone visibly outside his leg, with his teammates on their knees crying around him, was directed at his team. He told them to win the game, not a request, not a whispered plea. He said it clearly, repeatedly, with enough force that multiple teammates confirmed it afterward without being asked. Win the game. Just win the game. He said it while looking directly at Rick Pitino. He said it to the players surrounding him. Win the game. The medical staff worked around him for approximately 7 minutes on the court. 7 minutes of national television, of a 19-year-old kid on the floor with a catastrophic injury, choosing to use that time to motivate the people standing over him. Rick Pitino would later say it was the most remarkable thing he had witnessed in 50 years of basketball. Louisville won the game. They won by 14 points. They played some of the best basketball of their season in that second half. In the hours immediately following, watching their teammates suffer one of the most graphic injuries in the sport's history. Russ Smith, who had fallen to his knees at the site of the injury, scored 23 points. Players who had been visibly weeping 20 minutes earlier were executing plays with precision. The locker room at halftime, where Kevin Ware's words had been repeated, where his jersey had been placed at the center of the room, produced a performance that defied every logical expectation of human psychology. Sports will give you this sometimes. A moment so extreme that it collapses the distance between what people should be able to do and what they actually do. Louisville went on to win the national championship 6 days later. Kevin Ware watched from a wheelchair. The surgery lasted approximately 2.5 hours. Doctors inserted a rod into Kevin Ware's tibia to stabilize the fracture. The procedure was successful. The prognosis, given the severity of the injury, was cautiously optimistic. Doctors estimated a recovery time of approximately 12 months, which in orthopedic terms for a compound fracture of that nature was considered a reasonable outcome. He was back on the court in approximately 11 months. Let that land. A fracture, severe enough to make professional athletes sit down and cry on national television. A bone that had broken through the skin on live broadcast. 11 months later, Kevin Ware was playing basketball again. What the recovery actually looked like is the part the highlights never show you. The first weeks post-surgery are, by every account from athletes who have undergone similar procedures, a particular kind of psychological warfare. The body that you have spent your entire life training, trusting, building into a tool of precision, that body has now demonstrated that it can fail catastrophically without warning. The trust is gone. And rebuilding it is not a physical process. It is a mental one. Every jump is a negotiation. Every landing is a question. Not consciously, but somewhere beneath consciousness, the body remembers. It was not a fall, not a collision, not an opponent's impact that caused the injury. It was a jump, a normal, practiced, thousands of times repeated jump. The most ordinary thing a basketball player does. That is what makes this category of injury uniquely brutal to recover from, not the physical reconstruction. The psychological renegotiation with the simplest movements of your sport. Kevin Ware was drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers in 2014. He played in the NBA Development League. His NBA career never fully materialized at the level his pre-injury trajectory had suggested. This is where the story becomes more complicated than the moment. The injury happened at 19. The recovery was remarkable by any medical standard. But the window in which a basketball player develops the years between 18 and 22, when physical tools combine with growing experience, and players transition from prospects to contributors, that window does not pause for recovery. The players Kevin Ware would have competed against for roster spots continued developing while he rebuilt from the floor up. Professional sports operate without accommodation for timing. You are ready when you are ready, and the league decides whether that readiness matches what it needs at that exact moment. For Kevin Ware, the timing never aligned the way it might have. He has spoken about this without bitterness, which is its own form of remarkable. The moment defined him publicly in a way that had nothing to do with his actual basketball ability, and he has carried that with a dignity that the moment itself, brutal, public, entirely outside his control, did not earn him. What Kevin Ware's injury did, beyond the individual story, was change how sports media and sports medicine talked about catastrophic on-court injuries. The debate that followed the broadcast was immediate. Should CBS have aired the replay? The network did not replay the footage during the game, an editorial decision that drew praise. But the footage existed, it circulated, and the question of what responsibility a broadcaster has when a catastrophic injury occurs became a genuine conversation in sports journalism for the first time in a meaningful way. It also accelerated conversations about player safety in college athletics, specifically the intersection of catastrophic physical risk with programs that generate billions of dollars while the players themselves receive scholarships. But no salary. Kevin Ware's injury occurred in a game that was generating significant television revenue. He left that arena in an ambulance. These conversations have continued. They have not been resolved. There is a version of Kevin Ware's story that begins and ends with the moment, the footage, the reaction, the bone. That version is incomplete. The complete version includes a 19-year-old choosing his first words after catastrophic injury carefully, choosing to use them on behalf of other people. It includes 11 months of rebuilding something the body had stopped trusting. It includes carrying a public identity defined by the worst moment of your athletic life and refusing to let that definition be the final one. The night Kevin Ware's leg snapped on national television, nobody could look away. What happened after the choice made on the floor, the recovery that followed, the career that continued, in whatever form it took, that is the part worth looking at.